Here at WFMY News 2, we get a lot of calls from people asking legal questions. Most of the time, our staff can't answer them without going to an expert to make sure that everything is right. Today, we've got some people who are able to answer your questions directly, so you don't even have to go through us. These three attorneys' specialties are employment, workers' comp and personal injury, and estates and wills. So if you have a question that you want answered right now directly, you can text the question to the number on the screen, 336-379-5775. Let me introduce you to our guest today. Joining me today are Justin Irvin of Johnson, Pedrick and McDonald, Gabe Snyder of Ward Black Law, and Nicole Patino with the law offices of Fred T. Hamlet. One more thing, they're not giving legal advice, but they are able to point you in the right direction, and we want to make sure that that is really clear. All right, let's start with this question here, because this is one that we get often. It says, shouldn't my job be providing masks and hand sanitizer and soap for workers to keep them safe? Nicole, I believe that's your question.
So that depends on where you work. Most employers are providing those things, but it really depends. Right now, best practices, have your own hand sanitizer and masks. You can ask the employer for that, and typically they'll make accommodations and try to get those materials. But otherwise, depending on your job, they're not required to provide that.
All right, and if it's something where you don't feel safe, you as a worker can use all of those things.
Absolutely, always.
Okay, and an employer cannot tell you that you can't use hand sanitizer or a mask?
No, they may request that you not wear, well, no, right now we're all supposed to wear masks.
Okay, all right, good to know.
They may allow you not to wear a mask if there's a reason that you have a disability or there's some other reason that would prevent you from wearing a mask.
Okay. All right, Gabe, I think this question is for you. If I get COVID from someone at work because my job maybe didn't tell those people to go home or stay home, could my boss be liable to cover any medical bills if I get sick?
That's a great question. The first thing I want to correct is that your boss doesn't have to be liable or responsible. You just have to have a workplace accident. And so if that means in your context that you are more likely to get exposed to COVID given your occupation, such as if you were a nurse who is dealing with COVID patients and you contract COVID, then workers' comp could step in and not only pay for your medical bills, but your lost wages while you're out. And but they don't have to be at fault for anything they did wrong necessarily.
Okay. Justin, I believe this one's for you. If a person dies with no will, what happens to their real estate?
Well, it's going to pass by our intestacy statutes. I like to ask people, if they've made their own will or not. And if they tell me they haven't, then I tell them, well, lucky you, our General Assembly has made a will for you. Every jurisdiction within the United States has what are called intestacy laws. And if you haven't made your own will to say where your assets are going to go after your death, our General Assembly has made laws that say that for you. And it's going to go generally to your next of kin. And that's another question that you might want to think to yourself, who is your next of kin?
Because they're going to be getting your stuff or having to deal with all of that.
That's right.
Okay. And somebody says, well, wouldn't all of my stuff just simply go to my kids?
That if you have children, then they might end up getting a lot of it. But if you have a spouse, your spouse is actually at the front of the line. And your spouse could end up co-owning and inheriting your assets with your children. Another thing you need to think about is, are your children under 18? If they are, then that's going to create a guardianship situation and involve the courts even more. I just wonder, why would you want to leave that sort of thing up to chance? It's best to make a plan and you decide where your stuff goes.
You decide legally where everything's going, not just you decide. Okay, because there's a difference in that. Okay.
Right.
This person is asking, if a family member of mine gets very sick during the pandemic for something not related to the pandemic, can I leave from my job to take care of my loved one?
Possibly. FMLA will allow you to care for your family for non-COVID related reasons. FMLA does not provide for pay. So ask your employer and see if you're eligible.
Okay. This person is asking, can a job lay you off if you are on workman's comp?
Due to COVID, no, they can't lay you off if you're on workers' comp. Workers' comp doesn't allow you to fire somebody based on workers' compensation. If you're disabled and out on workers' comp, then no, you can't be fired. They need to continue paying your disability benefits to you until you're no longer disabled.
And that has nothing to do with COVID. But when you throw COVID in there, is there something that you're being asked often that deals with COVID and workers' comp?
Yes. So what's been happening is someone will get injured and then maybe not go out of work, or they haven't met that 7-day waiting period. And then COVID strikes and they have layoffs. And so the employer will try and say, well, you're not really out of work because of your disability. You're out of work because of COVID, and we have had to have layoffs. And therefore they're saying, well, workers' comp doesn't apply. But if you talk to an attorney, they can get that straightened out for you fairly easily.
Gotcha. Okay. This is a will question. Does the administrator of the will have the power to determine who gets what when you split things up?
You know, generally the person who makes the will says who's going to receive what, but sometimes they just say each person gets a third. And yes, our statutes do give the they're called personal representatives of an estate. That includes an administrator or an executor. They have some ability to divide things up, but they have to be impartial about it.
Okay. All right. We're going to have one more segment with our lawyers. So if you would like to get your question answered, you can text us, the number right down here at the bottom, 336-379-5775. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.